Hi, this is Chris from needlepointers.com. I've been doing a lot of straight line quilting recently for quite a few projects I've shared with you, and I just realized that we never did a video on how to do the straight line quilting. So I am here to show you my technique for doing straight line quilting across the quilt. So this is a quilt I've been working on. It's made with some fleece fabrics. So because of this, it's harder to see the quilting lines on here, but I'm making the quilting lines in black so you can see them here going across the quilt. And I'm only putting them in certain sections of this quilt. No matter if you're quilting across the entire quilt with straight lines or if you're just doing sections of it, you still do the same process for your straight line quilting. Just like with all other quilting techniques, you want to start by quilting from the middle of your quilt out to the outsides. So what I did for this quilt is I started with quilting these 5 lines here, and then I have 5 more lines down that end of the quilt, and now I'm quilting lines going the other direction across the quilt. But we always start from more towards the center of the quilt and work your way out. So like I started with this line here and worked my way towards the side of the quilt. And on the other side I did the same thing, and I started with one line and then worked towards the side of the quilt. For the next set of lines, I'm going to start with one just onto the orange part here and work my way this way, stitching a line every 2 inches. And I'm only going to stitch 5 lines, just like I have here. And then I'm leaving this part open, but I will be showing you this quilt in the end and show you what I'm going to do in these other sections. So I decided that the first line is going to be about 1/2 inch from the black. So when you're doing the straight line quilting, I like to use a chalk pencil, and I have different colors so that they'll show up on my different fabrics. And I mark my first line only with the chalk pencil. So what I'm doing is lining up my 1/2 inch mark on my ruler along the seam between the orange and the black. And then I am marking my line. I'm only going to mark my first line, and then I'll show you how we do the next lines after the first line when we're at the sewing machine. So at my sewing machine, I have the fabric underneath my presser foot and lined up with the line that I marked. Because I use yellow, it's pretty faint on here, but I can see the line going down here. So I'm going to follow the marked line for my first quilted line. I've set up my machine with a straight stitch, and I've made it a little bit longer than my normal length stitch. One, because this is thicker fabric, and 2, because for quilting I want it to be just a little bit longer stitches. This straight line quilting technique can be used with any kind of quilt. I'm just doing it with this fleecy quilt today. If you're starting off the edge of your quilt and you have a normal quilt that's going to have a binding, you can just start off the edge and start stitching onto your quilt fabric, because you should have extra batting and the backing going over the edge. For this quilt I've done a pillowcase style, so it's stitched all the way around the outside. So I'll start stitching forwards and back. I'm going to back tack and stitch down the line that I marked. Okay, so you can see I've stitched the first line here. It's recommended to use a walking foot, if you have one, for quilting your quilts, especially with the straight line quilting, so that all the layers of your quilt will feed through the machine at the same rate of speed. And you will remove your pins as you go along. So I leave the pins in until after I've stitched this line, and then the next one I can see that I'm going to run into these pins, so I'll take this next row of pins out before or while I'm stitching the line. It's also helpful to have your needle stop in your needle down position, so if you have to stop while you're going along, your quilt won't move and out of place and make your line crooked. Lastly, if you start to stray off of your line that you're stitching, don't just go quickly back and jump over, because then that's more noticeable in your stitching. I recommend that, if you notice, oops, I'm straying off of where I'm supposed to be sewing, you just gradually steer it back towards where you're supposed to be. So now that we have the first line done, the second line and the subsequent lines don't need to be marked, because I have this guide here that comes with my walking foot. And this guide can be used to guide yourself down the line of stitches. So this guide will go along your previous stitch line. That way you'll make a straight line for the next line of stitching. And then you just keep going down and making your straight lines by following the previous one. When you're following this, it's going to be a little bit strange, but you want to concentrate your eyes looking at the guide, not at where you're sewing. So that way you keep the guide going down this previous line of stitching. Otherwise, if you look over here, you're going to end up swerving off and not going straight down here. So I wanted my lines to be two inches from each other. So I used a ruler to measure from the center where my stitches will be over, and then I set my guide to be at that position. Similar to how I started the first line, I'm starting my second line and I'm concentrating my vision along the guide, not where I'm stitching. So for your straight line stitching, you just continue doing that, going down the whole line, and then move over and do the next line and the next line. And that's simply how you do it. You can make your straight lines at pretty much any distance apart that you would like. I'm just doing 2 inches apart for this one, but you could do 1 inch, could do 1.5 inch. You can do whatever amount apart you would like to do. And I've experimented with different amounts on different quilts to see what they look like. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and comment. Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you won't miss future videos. Visit our website, needlepointers.com, for lots of other quilting tutorials and free projects. While you're there, sign up for our weekly newsletter so you won't miss any new tutorials. Happy quilting!